Okay, I'm here for another episode of Talk to Thorin, and my guest on this one is going to be ImAPet, formerly the coach of CLG Gaming, CLG, and now the new coach of OpTic Gaming, who, funnily enough, don't really call themselves OG very much, but whatever. Could be that if your name's OpTic Gaming, right? So let's start in this place here. When you were signed up by OpTic officially, someone actually managed to dig up an old thread which showed when you first got announced as the coach of CLG. And in the thread, it's basically, most people are just like, who the fuck is this? This is shit. You know, oh, CLG obviously don't know what they're doing, or even worse, you know, they've skimped on not getting a good coach, you know. So obviously people didn't know who you were until you joined CLG. And in fact, since CLG didn't have any big results until literally, we're talking like April this year, most people didn't really follow CLG the last few months. So what were the situation that allowed you to, in fact, even first of all, become the coach of CLG? Like, did you actually have a background? Did you have any kind of pedigree to get that spot? Did you just apply and somehow get through the process? What went on?
Okay, so I guess we have to backtrack when PETA was still the coach at the time. So when we had PETA, he was stepping down to be a player, and he was going to compete like full time until like E-League LCQ or something.
Yep.
And at the time, I was his analyst, so I was just giving him a lot of notes. And then eventually, you know, him and Tarek left the roster. And then we ended up picking a new coach, GRT, with Sabrosa and Ethan.
Yep.
And throughout the time that we had with GRT, it was really unfortunate, I guess, because I thought he would put in a lot of like time and effort into the team, but it didn't feel that way. And we brought in an esports director. You might have seen his name is Trinity. Okay. He basically listened to all my concerns, and GRT was shortly removed right after I gave him all my concerns. And then, yeah, they made me the interim head coach, and I coached a full season of ECS. It was like ECS season 2 or something. Okay. And I got 5th place, which is like one short of the land. And then they decided to permanently keep me in the team as their coach. And I just kind of started grinding from that point on.
Okay, so when you say you were an analyst, like it's funny that the term coach can be so loose and mean so much in Counter-Strike, but the term analyst likewise can. Like, were you someone who, like, did you give them stats? Did you just literally look through demos and try and point out tendencies? What did you actually do when you were an analyst? Like, to what extent could you have input? Were you just giving them data and you had no clue if they used it?
When I was analyst for PETA, I gave pretty much tendencies, yeah, like a lot of tendencies. I would make like videos for him to visually show the guys like what this player does, because it's easier for some people to learn through like visually seeing it. For GRT, I did more of the same. I helped like a lot with videos and other stuff like that, just pretty much giving us the best chance to win a map.
Did you think they actually used it? Like, did you actually see in games like the effect of it, or was it frustrating? Was there like were you making points and then sometimes people either didn't pick up on it or didn't do it?
I guess at first it was pretty frustrating because, well, I really jumped into a major. It was I think it was like Cologne or something, yeah, where they got 16-2'd by Dignitas. And it was pretty frustrating because I knew what Rubino would do, and it didn't matter. He was just owning everyone anyways. So I guess I was frustrated then, but as time progressed, they started using my stuff more and more. And we had like a closer series versus FaZe at the E-League LCQ. When GRT was coaching, he used a lot of my stuff, and we felt like slightly more prepared for the season, but it still like felt a little like they didn't pay attention.
Even though this is the period when you're the analyst, so obviously it's not on you how the players play the game. You know, that's the coaches got a lot to do with that. The players themselves obviously carry a lot of responsibility for how they play. Since you were the analyst during that period and you were watching demos presumably of CLG and their opponents, I want to kind of pick your brain on a question, which is, until Tarek joined OpTic, he never actually really had like any kind of consistency in terms of like superstar performances, you know. I've watched a lot of him play ever since he first joined CLG in beginning of 2015, and he was the guy where he really was like the NA killer, you know. If it was an online game or it was an NA land, yeah, it looked fucking amazing sometimes, and you'd think, wow, can't wait to see this guy at the major or at the big international competition. But then it felt like he didn't really show up that much. Like, yeah, JDM could have big games against the international teams, but I always felt like something, I didn't know what was off with Tarek. And I know from talking to his teammates at the time, it seemed like they were always trying to find different solutions to it, you know, like Hayes was like, well, maybe I have to go in first and he has to come behind me and I have to set him up like that, or maybe we have to just let him be a lurker now, or he has to be the secondary AWP. They were always trying to shift around roles, and I could tell no one really ever figured out like what didn't click about his game. But we've seen in OpTic now, his game has clicked. He has at times been very good. What do you think what was the disconnect in CLG as someone who was watching a lot of the games and presumably trying to find a solution for this? What do you think his problems were?
Well, at the time when I was in CLG with Tarek, the biggest problem was actually just having a consistent roster, because you're not going to have a consistent role, because we were playing with PETA at the time. So without a consistent role, you're going to have like very inconsistent performances, because you're not always practicing the same thing over and over. So like sometimes PETA would IGL and then Color would IGL, and then Color had a weird period where he was opping over Akusta. So like Tarek was like shifting all over the place, and you can't expect a player to perform that well. They're just like changing all these positions, all these roles. Overall, like throughout my time watching him before that, Tarek felt like he wasn't put in like the right positioning. So like he would play like B apps on Mirage, which is okay, and I still think it's okay for him to play there. But sometimes, you know, with his like style of aim, he could be like a way better player in like connector or something, or like he can like show his like mobility with his aim.
What type of a player do you think he ideally is? Like, what do you think is the role or the types of players he needs around him to really bring out the best?
I think, well, now that Tarek's the IGL for OpTic, I think he sets himself up to be like an entry / IGL, where he can just make like all the players around him set up for him to get all these kills, and he'll get all the info, and then someone like Mixwell or Rush or Naf can like clean up all the kills after him.
Okay. So, as you mentioned, this particular era, especially the era when Peter was trying to be a player, was probably the most confused time in CLG's history, because you had some players like Tarek, for example, at that point already wanted out, and they were already talking to some teams, and they were trying to get deals done with some of the other big teams to leave. Then you had like, well, which of the old pros are going to stay? Because obviously at this point JDM had gone, he'd gone to Team Liquid, you know. And then, as you mentioned, you had Peter coming into the lineup, you had Cutler swapping roles around. So at this point in time, I think a lot of people actually wondered, is CLG just going to die? Or even worse, are they going to become like the 8th best team in NA or something? You know, it was a pretty bad period if you look even at the results, you know. How did the team get out of that? Like, was there really happenstance? Was it that people chose to leave and people retired and all these things? Was there any actual directing philosophy behind how the team figured its way towards the lineup it's got now?
So when I joined and all this stuff with Peter and Tarek, like them leaving, I had no idea that was happening. There was zero communication at the time. So and that's something that was a problem in the org. Like there was no communication. And you probably see that through like the time in CLG, where like there's Peter leaving and stuff like that, and like FNS getting kicked and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, so lack of communication was like a big cause of Tarek leaving, I guess. And then once we picked up GRT and Subrosa and Ethan, we slowly like started to get our stuff together. And then over time, we realized it wasn't clicking. And FNS just so happened to be available at the time, along with Daps, I think. But Daps was like a package deal with someone, so we didn't end up getting him. And then we got FNS, and then Ricky also so happened to be available at the time when we wanted to make another roster change, which was replacing Subrosa. So we ended up getting Ricky, and then started working on like double opping a lot more. So just a lot of fortunate roster pickups, I guess, over time.
Okay. So one of the key aspects, one of the key moves there, like to the naive fan who just looks at the result, they're going to think the key move was getting Ricky, because obviously he's been a pretty good player. He's really revitalized his career and played much better than at least on LAN, than he probably did in Renegades. But for me, the key move is getting FNS, because people realize now that in-game leaders really are worth their weight in gold, you know, when they're with the right team and the right players, etc., you know. And that's really the problem, I think, with in-game leaders, is because it's a role which is about making the other players better. And even if you're a good in-game leader, sometimes if it's not the right team or you don't have the right amount of power, you might not be able to do that. It means that I feel like the reason it's almost impossible to recruit is because unless you have the money to do what Team Liquid did and just buy Stanislaw, who looked like the best in-game leader, you're usually gambling when you get the in-game leader anyway, because maybe the team that were in before, everyone's like, oh, that guy's trash because he wasn't with the right teammates or he didn't have full control. And then maybe you give this guy the right players and he'll become very good. How did FNS end up coming back to CLG? Because from the outside, it actually looked like a depressing move. It looked like, oh, these guys really are in sort of like, we're accepting that we're like the 8th best team. And so they're like, let's just bring FNS back because he used to play for us and maybe he's okay. And no one really from the outside could have anticipated what's happened since. So what was do you have a sense, like, how did FNS end up back in CLG basically? And what were the expectations?
So it was after the E-League or during the E-League qualifier for the major, and I knew Hayes was leaving. We knew he was leaving for a while, and we needed to get someone fast. So because the upcoming season was like pretty close after the actual major itself. So we contacted like a few people. We tried looking at fraggers, IGLs, and we knew FNS recently became available after like that whole weird TSM thing where they made like Pro League, but that was going to get transferred like Sean Garrett's roster. So with FNS, he was basically just waiting for us to like make the call to him. And he didn't really have like a lot of options because his value also, I guess, decreased.
Sure.
Since he let Cephas call in TSM, and everyone like was aware of that. And like it brought like weird things where people are like, man, maybe he's not confident as an IGL. And, you know, can he do it again? Like, will he ever IGL? Or he's just going to be like some player that can like not show up in a server. That's what like people made it seem as. So I decided like the team needed a lot of structure. I think Color especially excels when there's a lot of structure. And it showed ever since FNS joined that Color's been doing a lot better. So I just wanted to go for a more structured approach. And I didn't want to go for a loose style that we had before with Hazed. And I think it's paid off.
So when you implement this then, how much of it is like you coming up with the concept of how we're going to play or what roles people are going to do? How much is FNS and how much is the players? Can you give us kind of like a breakdown or some examples?
Okay, so for the players, everyone besides FNS, I like to let them focus on their game. So I just want them to keep like working on mechanics and just overall playing the game a lot. For FNS and myself, we watch a lot of demos. I try to watch a little bit more than him just so I can like learn like basic flashes and like, or not basic, like advanced flashes that we don't see normally. And like, cause I can spend a lot more time and it gives him more time to focus on his game and get better and not be like an IGL who just doesn't show up on a server. So we worked a lot at nights to come up with strats, find strats that already worked in like other teams. Like we would take Astralis's Mirage and like put it into our team and it worked pretty well. Especially versus SK. I thought it worked really well. So yeah, we just put a lot of effort at nights to make strats and stuff and analyze teams. Vetoes and stuff were pretty much on me, and just getting tendencies was pretty much on me as well. So FNS was just mainly for strats.
What type of team does FNS like to run? Like, what's his kind of leadership style? How hands-on is he? How much is like, does he call something and then people can figure out themselves how it develops from there? What's he like as a leader?
So in the server, he'll go over a strat. He'll like to dry run it. So we enforce dry running a lot so people don't forget things. When we're actually playing the match, he's very like, you have to go here. Like he doesn't call numbers. He just says, you know, Kusta, you need to go for this B pick and we'll walk in with you. So he's very like direct with how he likes to call. He doesn't like to give a lot of freedom, but he gives enough for where Kenny and Reke can shine. That's how I see it.
And within the team, one of the players who obviously seemed to be like a problem child player was Kusta. And I mean in the sense that, again, here's another player where no one had really figured out how do you use him best. And in fact, unfortunately, he really had the label of like, you know, spoiled goods, damaged goods, because unfortunately, everyone in the NA scene has heard those stories, which apparently aren't entirely true, but there's just like a little bit of truth to them, that when he was in those enemy lineups, you know, the team was sort of based around him and he had a lot of calls made for him and he could kind of just aim on the crosshair, as it were, and kind of focus in that respect. And then obviously he got the opposite of that when he was in Team Liquid. They really threw him into like the lion's den, you know, he was playing with very demanding players, and obviously immediately you're expected to be extremely good. Otherwise, as you saw, he'd be out the door. So in CLG, what's kind of been the idea for how he's going to play, and what is his own sense of what he's going to do as a player?
So ideally, we would always let Kusa go for picks at the start of the round. Anything he wanted, we would tell anyone to like go ahead and follow him and give him flashes, give him smokes that he needs to make his plays at the start. If he didn't have the opportunity to do that, basically the whole game was based around Kusta pretty much, I would say baiting, I guess. He would just bait everyone on the team and try to clean up frags. And I feel like that's where he excelled the most, where if he had all the info and he knew where all the CTs were, he could take all these aim battles and win them most of the time. So that's how we try to structure it around Kusta. We didn't try to like make him make his own plays or anything like that. FNS would sometimes even just tell him to make like, go pick out T-mid on train and like get this guy crossing to ladder or whatever. So FNS was a big part of him getting a lot of picks, but he also like took some initiative. It wasn't like him just everyone built around him, but he was just like baiting for kills, I guess, at the end of the day.
Okay, and so obviously, as I referenced earlier, the last piece to join that kind of like made CLG the lineup that now's had these successful runs and these big upsets was Ricky, the Australian guy coming over from Renegades. And he was someone where I actually felt like he kind of struggled in Renegades. I mean, I know in some senses he was in his own Kusta and Team Liquid scenario there, where he was with the bigger names, you know, and they expected immediately that he's supposed to be very good. And if you notice in those team environments, because you're with people who either have been successful or are good players, they're not often as sympathetic to you, you know, if you're having difficulties adapting, you know, and it's kind of like either you get good or just get the fuck out. It really is kind of the way some of these guys run. So coming into CLG, it feels as though he's a new player. What was the reasons for wanting to pick Ricky up? Was some of it a gamble?
I guess you could say it was a gamble. We did give him like a few tryout scrims. We had a tryout with Hazed and Ricky, so those were our two options at the time. And with Ricky, we saw he had all the potential and like all the skill of rifling as Hazed, but he could also op. So our long-term plan was to use his op and like abuse it with Kustas, so we'd be like really dominant double opping team, and that's how we can like pull off most of our upsets and like try to be like a contender for like a semi-final or a final if we like put in enough time and effort into like making their ops really good. Because if we were just going to do like a normal style where we were just like single opping, maybe like we didn't have the talent or like the players to make the plays they needed to. So Ricky was like a big part of me. Like I saw the playmaking that he gave, and especially with an op, and he pushes Kusta a lot when he ops, like to make like all these different ideas and decisions mid round. So he plays like a big part in like the whole team getting like kills and playmaking.
Okay, so that's an interesting topic there, because actually one of the things people might remember was with the bad lineup of CLG, the one where it was in the last chance qualifier and it was the end of Tarek's time, you know, and the lineup was clearly never going to last forever with that 5-man lineup. That was the period of time where people might remember in the last chance qualifier game against FaZe that actually you guys gave them a really good run, particularly because actually Kusta was rifling, and famously that's the thing. He'd been forced to give up the AWP in Team Liquid, but now it's like he seemed to have almost himself decided, yeah, maybe AWPing's not for me now, I'm just going to become a rifle-only player. So when you bring Ricky in, someone who basically has AWPed his whole career, people are immediately going to ask the question, like, well, does that mean Kusta is going to AWP at all? Like, does that mean you do the double AWP? Who gets priority of the AWP in this sense? And I know that actually it seems like Kusta has swapped back and forth, just even right up to now, alternating back and forth. So is the philosophy that it was the secondary AWPer and that he would do it on specific times? Does he kind of just have the green light to get it when he wants to? Was there a general philosophy as to how you wanted Kusta to and how he himself thought he should be an AWPer?
Yeah, so with Kusta, I wanted him to always primary over Ricky because I think that's his biggest strength, and Ricky's proven to be a capable rifler throughout our matches. But if he's not feeling it, then Ricky is more than like capable of filling into Kusta's roles and like throwing the smokes that he needs to, that Kusta does. So it's very interchangeable. As far as like the rifling goes, I think since both of them in their careers have gone through a heavy rifling phase, like Ricky has gone through a heavy rifling phase in our team, and Kenny or Kusa has also gone through a heavy rifling phase back during that E-League qualifier or like last chance qualifier. So they both are like pretty versatile now, and it's not that big of a deal if we have both ops or one op or just full rifles. I think their play styles are very interchangeable and helps the team a lot.
Is it difficult to convince players to go down these paths? Do they have to already kind of want to do it? Are they receptive in that sense? If you give them suggestions or say this is kind of how I conceive how you're going to play?
Yeah, no one really, like, we were down in the dumps, so I guess everyone was open to anything at that point.
Okay, fair enough. So when you are the coach in this respect, one thing that a lot of people, and I almost never hear this discussed, but it's the first question I have for every coach, which is like, to what extent do they actually run the practice? Like when they play the scrims, one of the things NA teams are infamous for is just playing scrims as if it was a warm-up match, or sometimes because they want to beat that opponent, they're like really weird reasons where it's not practice. How much of being the coach, have you actually been able to run the scrims of CLG and have specific things in mind that you're going to do? And did you get that level of control?
Yeah, so every scrim day, we would have a plan that I would come up with the night before. So if we wanted to practice defaulting and getting picks off a default, we would do that like pretty much every match. If we wanted to do a strat, we would do like 15 rounds in a row, even though people say like they did in the past, that usually never happens, but that's something I try to do. And it was pretty successful. You run into like a lot of roadblocks as well because people try to counter you. So you find out like all the problems with your strat and it fixes itself a lot faster. So I think I had a lot of control coming into the team and all the scrims and stuff. FNS also like listened to a lot of what I said. So if I told him to call more aggressively in a scrim and like try to go for more picks and like practice that kind of style so we'll be ready in a match, he would instantly do it. So I had no problems.
So one of the bizarre things about CLG during your tenure with the team is that, ignoring the international results, it's actually quite logical that people kept underestimating CLG coming into those international tournaments, because traditionally, when you look at the NA teams, you usually start with like, okay, how do they do domestically? Are they one of the best teams there? Which teams can they beat? And usually roughly kind of where they stack up in NA does kind of usually reflect what will happen when they go to the international tournaments. Whereas what's bizarre is, even continuing right up to the present, and in fact when you just left the team, CLG continued to perform much better against international teams, sometimes much better teams in fact, than domestically against NA online and on LAN. So just on the NA side of the equation, why do you think CLG, for whatever reason, hasn't actually done that well against the domestic competition?
I think the major issue was people didn't put in as much work as they would for a LAN. So that has something to do with it. So the work ethic was kind of worse coming into online matches, or like the effort and motivation to do well. We didn't do that badly. I think we missed one match per league to make the LANs. So like ECS, we missed out on one match, and then EPL, same thing. So it wasn't like we were like low confidence going into all these international LANs. We felt pretty good in NA, and like we could beat anyone. So like going all these qualifiers for all these LANs, we were just always confident against NA teams.
Okay, so one way I wanted to ask about the two LANs we had the big finishes is actually by first and foremost asking about the big upsets. Because I noticed a trend, and this is one of the reasons actually I think why, beyond the results themselves, I think there has been some hype surrounding you, that people are like, oh, what does this guy do in the team? Like, is it him and FNS? What have they done? And obviously now people are excited that you moved to OpTic. It's because not only did CLG get these big upsets, I count like these 3 big upset wins. There was the one over Gambit, which was on Cobblestone. There was the one over SK, which was on Overpass. And then there was, oh, wait a second, I've got that wrong way around. Who was
Mirage.
Oh, it was Gambit again on Overpass. Yeah, there's another one. Then there was the Mirage one against SK. And the key element here is that these are not just upset wins over much better teams, on paper, but they're also, crucially, on some of the strongest maps of those teams, if not the strongest in some cases. Mm-hmm. So as soon as you see that, like, in fact, it's the first thing I thought as soon as I saw the Cobblestone one. Right? Normally, the underdog team just wouldn't even play those maps. So as soon as someone lets that map through, either they just don't understand the pick ban, which can sometimes happen, that that is sometimes the case, or it means they've specifically got a game plan for that opponent. So first of all, were these moves actually maps where you use the logic of like, well, they are so good on these maps that if I plan for that map, I'm definitely going to get it? Was that always in mind with these teams?
So for every single one of our upsets and breaking their streaks and stuff, I knew exactly what map we were going to play. So I always developed a game plan for both sides. I was never like caught off guard by the vetoes. So I was always prepared going to every match. And I was always trying to exploit like a player on each side. And yeah, I just figured out every tendency that the team could do. And I made sure I was able to communicate it to FNS so he could communicate it to the rest of the team.
Because I feel like this is an example of where, if it works, that sounds really cool. That sounds like, wow, yeah, what a great way to outthink the opponent. But that's sort of where I almost feel like we have to put a disclaimer, like, don't try this at home, kids. Like, this won't work in most instances. Because normally, if you let, like, SK have Mirage, Gambit have Cobblestone, everyone loses. Even, like, Virtus.pro loses, even Astralis loses, It's actually very tough to make this work. So, obviously, it's not that you just had a very simple plan. Like, for each of these matches, go through one at a time. Is there like a couple of things or a key thing that you had as a concept of like, this is exploitable? Like, for example, okay, Gambit's Cobblestone streak, it had gotten to the point where even the best teams in the world were like, let's just not play them on this map. Like, they're just too good on this one map. What did you notice that it was even possible to exploit? Or what was the game plan for this?
Okay, I guess it doesn't matter if I say it now because they probably fixed it.
Exactly.
But for Gambit on Cobble, so I'll start with that one. I recognized, so I watched a shit ton of demos and I realized that their drop was pretty weak, and in general their entire like danger setup was pretty weak on A. So I kept trying to abuse all our strategies towards A and picking off Zeus specifically because I knew he wasn't a very strong aimer. So I would just try to make sure we could kill him, get that map control, and then execute on A. And like split through drop and stuff like that. I would try to avoid B as much as possible, but I would mix it up once in a while. And that was my general strategy on T side. For CT side, I knew they would try to hit B a lot on like ecos. They would try to abuse drops, so I try to lean more towards that side. And then if they try to go A, it was really obvious, like because I recognized every tendency they would do. Like if they would smoke CT side of mid, I knew exactly it was going to be A, 100%. So nothing they did would ever catch me off guard.
Okay, and the interesting thing about the Overpass one is that because Gambit became so famous for the Cobblestone wins, a lot of people didn't notice that actually it was Cobble and Overpass were kind of like the two that they had, and that's part of how they sometimes got Cobble. If someone didn't want to play Overpass, they were like, let's just play them on Cobble. We're both good on that map. So what was the concept for the Overpass game?
Okay, yeah, this probably doesn't matter either. They probably fixed it. But for Overpass, I knew Zeus, again, another player I picked on, was playing outside Monster on B site. So I tried to make a lot of strategies where we would have a specific flash for him, or like we would just contact and hit him. And then on CT side, I would have the same thing. Like we would play like triple B and then make sure they couldn't get out Monster or short. And then for A side, I would make sure we'd always get info early to see where they go. Because if they peaked a lot, like 2 or 3 guys, you would always know it'd be A. But if they peaked like 1 guy or 2 guys, you would know it's just B 100%. So they were like very readable for me out of like any other team I played.
Okay, even though those ones are really great kind of scalps to get, because Gambit's still a very respectable team, and particularly those 2 maps, they obviously had these great streaks on them where they were very good. The one against SK on Mirage, I feel like this one has to be the weirdest one, because SK clearly is absolutely unbelievably good right now. And I think if I had to pick a map at the moment, the 2 maps that I think people are having the hardest time, like kind of getting a set pattern that you can always make something work on, is Mirage and Inferno. Those are maps that are so variable as to how many T rounds you get. So a lot of people look at the T side of Mirage for SK and they're like, I'm not even sure that they've got like revolutionary strats or smokes. It just looks like they have Fur and Coldzera. Like that'll help you do a lot on the T side of Mirage. So how is it possible to beat SK on Mirage?
I think actually their Mirage is too overhyped and like they kind of get in their own head. So what for like a player, so I always try to abuse a player every time I want to beat a team. So the one player I abused when we were on CT side versus them was Fur, because I knew Fur always goes like underpass or like rushes into connector. Like he always does that. So if you make him play scared, like you force him to be uncomfortable, then they will lose the match. That's how I took that approach. So I always like abuse mid control. I made like color push underpass and like stop fur. So as soon as fur started slowing down, the match got way easier for us. So that's the biggest thing I thought of like when playing against SK on Mirage, and would try to the same concept again on OpTic in Cologne, and that it worked the same way.
Okay. Is it actually possible to do anything to Coldzera? Like, to me, he looks like the most ridiculous example of what they usually say in basketball, you know, where, like, if you really have, like, a legitimately god-tier player in basketball, like LeBron or something, you can, like, tell the defender what to do, and you can give him, like, a basic idea of, like, you know, maybe make him go left on this shot, but you still feel like that person, the star player, is going to do whatever they're going to do anyway, you know. You can't really you can't stop them, you can maybe limit them a little. Is there a basic concept as to what teams should do against Coldzera?
I don't think teams should worry too much about Coldzera. Like, he'll have these big rounds and big clutches, but it's Fur who's going to give you the most trouble, or Taco, because they're entering the site and they're making space for Coldzera. So as soon as you like stop giving them space, then you'll most likely win the match.
Okay. So when you had the Star Series performance, okay, the one where you made the top 8, and obviously because of the fact you played Astralis, who, by the way, were 1 round from winning the tournament, you know, like, that's obviously like one of the toughest outs you could get in the playoffs. So no one really blamed your team for losing the game. When you had that performance, a lot of people probably thought, wow, big overperformance from CLG, like, oh, they must be so happy with that result, you know, and then going forwards, they'll probably hope they can do something similar. But then that guy who's like, I forget his exact title within CLG.
Trinity.
What's his actual title in the team?
Esports director.
There we go. He made this post where he did like the classic thing where it's like, I understand internally that you might be like, listen, you know, we all accomplished what we want to do and we want to do better in the future, and that's all great. But he kind of like publicized that outside the team. Like, you know, we knew this had happened. In fact, that's not even as good as we thought we should do at the tournament. Can you kind of, can you give some context to that? Can you explain like maybe what he meant or what this sentiment in the team was? I mean, I'll just say this. I was at the event, and Ricky himself, before one of the games, I think it was the Gambit game, basically told us, like, not like we're going to lose the game, but he sort of made it like, yeah, we're in deep shit, you know, like it's probably not going to work out well. So I don't know that everyone in the team really was on the same page that guy said. So can you kind of give us some context here? What was the sense in that regard?
Let me say this without getting in trouble, I guess. The statement was weird, I guess. I mean, I think that what we achieved was really good. I mean, obviously no one's going to be satisfied losing, but we also lost to Astralis. So we can't really like blame ourselves. We can only like fix the mistakes that we made, like losing a 4v2 or whatever to like Device and Zipnix or whatever. Like, I guess that's what he's talking about, but I'm not really sure. Like, I guess he expects us not to make those kind of mistakes when we put in that much time and effort.
Okay.
But
was the team surprised by the Star Series result?
I guess so. Well, none of my teammates knew we were going to play these maps because I don't really get them involved in like vetoes. So I just kind of like surprised them with all these map picks, and then we ended up winning because I had like a lot of preparation going into every single one of these picks. So I think it was a surprise for them, but for me personally, I felt pretty confident like making it out of groups. Okay.
And obviously the weirdest element about the DreamHack result is that in theory, your team's supposed to be the weakest team in that group, and you won the group. So what like, if I look at some of the players in CLG at the time, I would have to say a bunch of those players are people who have suffered some serious confidence issues in their career, and that not only, you know, play-wise have played poorly, but haven't necessarily been the people who had kind of like the drive, like, yeah, we're going to upset all these guys, you know. And so I would normally say you put them in a group like that, that should be the killer right there, you know. Every game's going to be tough. There's no easy out, you know. You can't hope someone else upset them and then you beat them in the final. Every team there, in theory, is favoured. So what do you think the secret was to managing the success at DreamHack?
Well, we've been through a lot of series before that online where there was like a lot of OTs and like long days and qualifiers. So we were kind of used to like very strenuous days. So like that Fnatic game that went to like 5 overtimes, it wasn't that big of a deal for us because we've been there before and we've experienced it online. The only difference was now is like a LAN environment. But honestly, I think it has something to do with like the booths because it didn't make us like feel like any different. Like the booth setting actually like felt great for us. So that I guess that's something to do with it. Like, it gave us like a lot of comfort than just being like opened up to like the audience. Just like, yeah, our confidence was always high, especially after beating Gambit on Overpass. So Fnatic didn't really phase us, and we were always confident facing Gambit again because we beat them on Cobblestone. So we were never like out of steam or lacking confidence going into the tournament. Did we expect to like make it out of groups? I guess not, but we ended up doing it anyways. So it's pretty proud of that.
So, as I said before, since no one really knows, especially team to team, what the analyst does and how much input he gets, etc., and how much input the coach gets, etc., people often have to kind of just assume or speculate on what happens. So with some of these upset results, since the in-game leader is FNS and he seems to be doing a pretty good job, some of this is going to get put down to him as well. Now that you're not in the team, are they going to have to go a different approach in CLG? Can FNS just take over and the new analysts take over kind of what you did and come up with these game plans to upset people?
So I think FNS can do something similar to what I do. It just comes down to his work ethic. So some days I just literally wouldn't sleep and I would just like pop a 5-hour energy or something and just like stay up all night watching demos. So if he puts in that level of work, I guess it can still happen. He might not need to, but that's what I felt was necessary for us to win. I think the team is fine and they'll still keep making upsets with or without me, but it'll be much harder on them and they'll have less focus on their game going forward.
So from the outside, most people in CS are used to the concept that, you know, you sign a contract to work with someone and then either the contract ends and you can go anywhere, you're like a free agent in sports, you know, or someone buys you out from the contract and you go over to the team that you bought out from. So what was the situation with how you've been able to move from CLG to OpTic? Like, with your contract end, were you in a position where they were going to buy you out? How did this come about?
In CLG, if you're not a player, you're an employee. So I was an official employee for CLG, and with that, all I do is just give them a notice, and then I could leave whenever I wanted.
Okay.
And
I realize you've just joined OpTic, okay, right? So in theory, you got to be careful. You got to play it right. But I know Hex is a person, right? He's someone who he's willing to let people show their personality, you know, and have opinions and stuff. So if I ask you this question right now, you know, just answer however you want, okay?
Okay.
So most people would look at OpTic and go, okay, yeah, good players, you know, maybe you can make something out of these players, but they're not a great team right now. At the moment, they haven't had, I mean, I realized they did after that have good results, but they were doing pretty badly. So most people would think, perhaps cynically, that must be a much better payday, right? I mean, if OpTic comes, they come with the big bucks, and that's why you'd want to join them. That's got to be a factor, right?
Money was not really the factor because CLG did attempt to match the offers that I got, but it wasn't the main factor. I guess the main factor for me was I really just wanted to win, and having the disappointing showing at the PGL minor, the Americas minor, was a big factor of me wanting to leave because I just felt like I wasn't going to make a major anymore, and I've already failed twice in CLG, so I definitely don't think I was going to fail on OpTic.
So I have actually described OpTic many times this year because, I mean, it's a fairly obvious observation to make, by the way, but because they're a team that have all the same players except their in-game leader, and then as soon as their in-game leader left, their game went to shit, and their in-game leader now has actually done a decent enough job elsewhere. It's a fairly obvious observation to make that, like, this should be the dream team for anyone to join, either as an in-game leader or as a coach. Because in theory, the pieces are all there. It's like having a sports car that someone just needs to fix one little bit on it, and then you've got a sports car, you know. Yeah, before that, it's broken, it doesn't work. But at least you have the potential to have a sports car. Whereas for me, if you're in CLG, that's like having like a camper van and you're trying to, like, you know, tweak it a bit and, like, you know, rev it up a bit, and then you've got to drive it really fucking well, you know. And so if you did an amazing job, you're pretty good, but it's never going to beat a sports car. So coming into OpTic, what was the expectation here?
You know, I guess you said it the best. They're like a sports car. So they have like all the good pieces. I think Terra can be like a really good IGL. Like coming into their scrims and stuff, I felt like they lacked a lot of like strats and like ways to approach map control. So I think over time, especially like when Pro League comes around, we should be ready to go, and like we should be like tournament ready again, like they used to be when they won like E-League and Northern Arena at the time.
So the biggest difference I've already seen in OpTic in the short time you've been there and the last couple of tournaments is this is a good example of where people have got to look for like trends. Like you don't just look at the superstar player, for example. Okay, it's not like if Mixwell's amazing or if he isn't. That decides everything. Like one of the things I noticed about the Stanislaw era of OpTic is like that is the best period of Rush's career. He used to look fantastic in that team. And then if you're a good in-game leader and you've got someone who's a good entry player like that who's really going off, that's like the dream player to have, you know, because they obviously activate so much of what you're calling and it just makes everything so much more effective. But in all the time pretty much that Stanislaw was gone, Rush will even admit it himself, his game just went to shit completely. And he, even if they had the odd good result, it almost was never him, you know, his style seemed like it was just destroyed. And I noticed just recently that he's having these big performances again. What do you think he needs as a player? Like what do you think was malfunctioning for him?
So I think having me and Tarek, like, so Tarek having the role change and me coming in helped a lot. So I introduced, like, with the brief time that I had, like, we haven't done much, but with the brief time I did have, we went over like some map control and like Mirage and stuff like that, and like how to approach different situations, like CT sides, and like how to be more proactive and stuff like that. I think also Tarek puts him in like better positions to like get kills and like trade frags better, because Tarek's like very receptive to everything I say and like all the notes I gave him and stuff. So it just puts everyone in the team in a better spot to, you know, just like get more kills and like get their stats up, I guess.
So even though Mixwell is the star name in the team, you know, and he's had these fantastic performances, he seems like a very weird guy, because he's one of those guys where it's not a stereotype. It really is the case in most instances that most star players are very confident players. Like some of them, I mean, I'll give Tarek credit for this in that sense. Even when he was in CLG and he wasn't doing any of the shit that he can do now, if you ever talked to him, you'd think the guy was making like the final of every major, you know. He was ridiculous. He thought he was like, it could be the best AWPer and I can be a lurker as well. And, you know, his confidence was off the charts. But I actually know, even when Mixwell's been really good in the past OpTics that were like winning E-League, he would be like, oh, I'm not sure if this is the team for me, and, you know, or maybe I shouldn't even AWP. Like, I'm not a true AWPer, you know, I should be a rifler. And he seemed himself like a player where he's all over the place. He doesn't necessarily know, like, I guess from the outside it sounds strange to say this, but it seems almost like he himself has a different idea of himself than the rest of the world. The rest of the world looks at him like, you're a fucking banger, mate. You're the star player. You got sick AWP. How do you think Mixwell should be used ideally?
So over time, we're going to try to solidify our roles, and, you know, we're not going to like do all the swapping that they're currently going through and have gone through since Stanislaw left. So he probably won't be opping as much anymore. Okay. That's how I think it'll go, and he'll be more of a rifler. And then we might have NAF primary op, or we might get an opper in replace of Hayes if we choose to not continue with him, which is like to be determined, I guess.
Sure.
I just think he can do pretty much anything, and if he just wants to rifle, then I will make sure that he can only rifle, and then he can secondary if he wants. But I just want to make him very comfortable, and I think he just needs someone to give him more directioning on what to do.
I would normally just ask, like, straight up, like, obviously OpTic players have accomplished a lot more, bigger names, bigger egos, like, are they as receptive? Does the fact that, in a way, they were in the CLG position, you know, like, relative to who they are, they were also kind of down in the shit, you know, and they weren't doing any good results. Has that made them more receptive, do you think?
I guess they were receptive. Like, I've heard a lot of things before I joined that, like, you know, there's some attitude problems or like communication issues. Yeah. And I haven't felt that yet. So everyone's been really respectful, and like, if there's been an argument, it's been settled super quickly, and everything's been constructive. So I haven't felt any things I heard in these rumors. Just there's a lot of respect, and everyone's really receptive to change.
Does the fact that Tarek is essentially, I mean, he's trying to become one, but he's not really an in-game leader right now. Does the fact that he's having to learn the role also give you more kind of access to integrate and implement what you want to do?
Yeah, he's very open to everything I say. So it feels like he's a lot like FNS, where at first he was also very like receptive to everything I said. So it gives me a lot of time to like mold him a little bit. But at the same time, he also has like ideas that I don't see. So we can like bounce a lot of stuff off each other. And I think we'll succeed a lot more if we just keep like bouncing off all these ideas. And then he'll be like, I think, one of NA's greats for IGLs.
I always say about anyone in leadership roles that there's different ways to be a leader, you know. I mean, I like did a whole video where I broke down kind of like the archetypes, you know. There's like the kind of the guy who's like the big brother, you know, who's like, you know, do things my way. There's the guy who's like the friend, you know, who kind of comforts people like, oh, you know, if we all just work together, it'd be good. There's the guy who's like the mastermind, you know, who just tries to convince people by showing them, look, you know, look at my working out. This is the correct plan. This is the best way to do it. So there's a lot of different approaches to take. And unfortunately, a lot of people only really know like the bigger brother, like the leader one, who's like kind of like the authoritarian, you know, like you will do it this way because I say so and I'm in charge, you know. What type of personality do you have? Are you someone who... Can you be an authority figure? Can you be forceful? Do you try and just reason with people as to why you want to do? What's kind of your general philosophy in that sense of being a coach?
I guess I will be authoritative if I need to be. So I guess most situations I would need to be. But if I want people like, I'll be receptive to people giving me criticism. And if they want to like change or tweak things, it's not like my way or the highway. I open for them to like give me feedback and like put their ideas in. So I guess I'm very flexible, but at the same time, if shit needs to get done, then it needs to be done like the way I think it should be done.
In NA, I know barely any of the coaches in terms of like, even from their own players, a lot of them, I don't hear things. Like they don't tell me, oh, this happened because our coach did this or our coach did extra work on this. A lot of them have coaches, but a lot of them either contribute a little bit or they do some of the basic. In fact, some of the coaches, basically, if we're honest, are analysts. They just have the title coach. You know, a lot of them don't necessarily do actual coaching, like don't develop a player or system and stuff. You know, sometimes in some of these teams, the star player does that or the in-game leader does that. Are you the best NA coach?
If I can make like a tier list, I would make it so Zeus, myself, and Zach from Immortals are on like the same tier.
Why on the same tier though? Why aren't you better than them?
Well, I'm not 100% sure what else they do, but it seems like they have a really good impact on their team. And just like I do talk to like Zach from Immortals a lot, so I know what he does, and it's similar to what I do. For Zeus, I'm not really sure, but I'll just like assume that he does something similar for now. And for everyone else, I'm not really seeing anything from them at the moment.
So one area that I always feel a bit sorry for NA in is when people talk about stuff that, like, here's the problem. Because NA in general isn't as good as EU in terms of results, people are always thinking, what can NA do more? And so while it's true, yes, a lot of these NA teams, star player could watch demos. Yes, they could put coaching in more. That's all because they need to make up a gap. Now, in truth, it's not that they're just not doing that and the NA EU teams do that, because I actually know most of the EU teams. In fact, some of the very good EU teams don't do any of that shit, or do very little, or do just as much as NA does. Okay, so I don't blame NA in that sense. But as a result, there's a lot of EU coaches, actually, who I can tell you from behind the scenes, they aren't super sick coaches. In fact, some of them do, well, questionable amounts, let's just say that, or some of them aren't the most responsible person for a key move they make in the game. I mean, obviously, they have some legendary star players and in-game leads in Europe. Do you think, if we come back in a year from now, could ImAPet be the best coach in all of CSGO?
I think so, yeah. I mean, I'm going to keep putting in a lot of work and try to improve myself as a coach. So I'm never going to stop, like, improving myself and my coaching style. I'm going to evolve, like, as the team evolves. So hopefully we'll be pretty good, and then I'll be also pretty good.
Do you have some special talent for this thing of being able to research an opponent's best map and find a tendency? I mean, you make it sound very easy, but a lot of teams aren't doing this or can't do it, right?
I mean, I developed my own style on like scouting and getting tendencies. It's not something I'm willing to like share out loud, but sure. It's a lot of like trial and error for you finding your own style and getting the most out of like the time you spend. So I think every time I like scout for a demo or something and try to get tendencies, it's very efficient and productive. And I'm not wasting time, like wasting hours looking for something and then finding nothing at the end.
Okay. At the end of the interview, do you have a final message or someone you want to thank or say hello to?
Thanks OpTic and OpTic fans. Thanks to CLG fans for not shitting on me so much for leaving. I got some hate messages, but it's fine. I understand. That's pretty much it. Yeah.
My name is Tarek. Welcome to Thorin's YouTube channel. What up guys, this is Jordan Nelson Gilbert and
Hello guys, this is Gabriel Fallen, player from OpTic Gaming.
Salut les gars, c'est Shox de G2.
Hey guys, this is Spencer Rico Martin.
We work with some of the world's top pros to teach you how to take your game to the next level with constantly updated training content. When you're done watching and want to train or warm up, just a few clicks will put you in your favorite training mods like Deathmatch. But why warm up for a match on Mirage by getting shot in the back on Dust 2? That's why we built Duels. Real fights on real maps. 1 minute in Duels is like 20 rounds of real CS. The best way to train and warm up. Exclusively available on Boomeo.com.